What if everything you learn from movies about the Wild West has nothing to do with the harsh reality of survival on the prairie? Imagine an endless plain where the sky suddenly turns black and a wall of icy water crashes down on the earth. The Native Americans of the Great Plains did not have waterproof nylon raincoats or modern tents with sealed seams. However, even in the most violent downpour, they managed to stay completely dry and not die of hypothermia. Watch the video to the end to find out how an ordinary bison hide was turned into a complex ventilation system and why a properly dug hole in the center of the teepee was more important than the thickness of the walls. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of survival on the prairie, which will change your entire perception of comfort in the wild. Native American teepees are often mistakenly referred to as simple tents, but they were actually perfect aerodynamic devices. Unlike modern tents, the teepee had a sloping shape that allowed the wind to flow around the structure without excessive pressure. The huge leather cone effectively cut through the air currents and directed them around the living space. The bison leather used to make the covering had the unique property of being naturally waterproof and very reliable. This was achieved thanks to residual fat and a special process involving many hours of treatment with thick smoke from a fire. When heavy rain began, the microscopic fibers of the leather swelled slightly from the moisture and blocked the pores. As a result, the surface turned into a monolithic shield that did not allow water to penetrate inside the dwelling. The water did not soak into the material, but rolled rapidly down the steep slope. The moisture drained into the ground far from the sleeping areas, keeping the interior completely clean. This unique combination of form and material allowed the people inside to feel safe. While the elements raged outside, the Indians could calmly go about their daily business. The structure of the leather covering itself was the result of the labor of many generations of craftsmen and experienced hunters. They knew which parts of the bison hide were best suited to withstand the direct impact of rainwater. Properly tanned leather could last for decades without losing its unique protective qualities. It was a true high-tech product of its time, made exclusively from natural components. Each teepee was oriented according to the cardinal directions, taking into account the prevailing winds of the specific area. This helped the structure remain stable even in the strongest gusts of wind. The sloping rear wall took the brunt of the elements, protecting the entrance from flooding. This architectural trick was critical to keeping the small leather house warm. The poles to which the leather was stretched also played an important role in the drainage system. They created a smooth frame that prevented the material from wrinkling or sagging. If a pocket of water formed on the leather, it would inevitably begin to leak inside. The Indians carefully monitored the tension of all the ropes before the start of each rainy season. Particular attention was paid to the lower edge of the teepee, which was in contact with the damp prairie soil. It was often weighed down with heavy stones or covered with turf to create an additional barrier. This prevented splashes and dirt from getting under the covering itself during a storm. Inside, the space remained dry and clean, protected from the vagaries of severe weather. Interestingly, the color and patterns on the teepee skin also had a practical purpose for protection. Natural pigments could create an additional thin layer that sealed small irregularities in the material. Sacred symbols not only protected the warrior's spirit, but also strengthened the physical structure of the skin. Every detail in this portable home served a single purpose of survival. Rain on the prairie is often accompanied by hail, which can easily damage the thin fabric of a modern tent. However, thick bison leather easily withstood the impact of ice balls of any size. It was reliable armor that protected the life and health of the entire nomadic family. In such a shelter, people felt a connection to the earth and complete protection from the sky. Do you think the teepee design is more advanced than our modern tourist tents? Write about it in the comments. We are very interested to hear your personal opinion. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new amazing discoveries about the lives of different peoples. We try to find the rarest facts from the history of North America for you. Want to know the main secret that can completely change your understanding of how thermodynamics and climate control work in the field? Man's main enemy during rain was not the downpour itself, but the insidious and almost invisible condensation. It was condensation that slowly but surely deprived people of warmth, turning a night's rest into a struggle for survival. To solve this problem, Native Americans used a special inner canopy called a liner. This additional layer of leather or fabric was attached to the poles from the inside and reached approximately human height, forming a second wall inside the teepee. A vital air gap was created between the main outer covering of the teepee and this inner canopy. It functioned both as a thermos, retaining heat, and as a powerful natural extractor fan, ensuring continuous air circulation. Any moisture that could seep through the top of the teepee or form, as condensation did not get inside the living space, but onto the outside of the liner. As a result, the water flowed down the canopy and into the ground behind the people, without touching their beds and clothes. Another critically important property was the almost complete absence of smoke. This was essential for life inside the teepee. The fire lit in the center of the dwelling should not fill it with acrid smoke. Bison dung produced a clean flame, and the small amount of smoke that was formed easily escaped through the smoke vents at the top. The inner canopy also served as an excellent heat insulator, retaining precious warmth on cold and damp nights. This allowed for significant savings in firewood, which was difficult to find, dry, and preserve in rainy weather. The inner layer was removable and mobile, making it easy to take off the liner and dry it in the sun immediately after a storm. The material for the canopy was usually chosen to be thinner, softer, and more pliable than the main teepee leather. It was often decorated with embroidery, tribal symbols, or paintings, transforming the austere camping dwelling into a truly homely space. The Indians highly valued this interior element for its versatility, combining practicality, beauty, and protection. The lower part of the liner was neatly tucked inside and pressed tightly against the beds of the teepee's inhabitants. This created the effect of an airtight cocoon, reliably protected from drafts, splashes of water, and cold air creeping across the floor. Even if there was a sharp icy wind or heavy rain outside, the temperature inside remained stable, mild, and comfortable. People could sleep peacefully without wearing extra layers of clothing, completely trusting their proven protection system. It is especially important that the gap between the two layers of skin created a powerful and stable draft for the hearth. Cold air entered from below, rose through this vertical channel between the walls, and exited through the smoke hole at the top. This not only effectively removed smoke from the living space, but also gradually dried the teepee covering from the inside. Such natural ventilation was the key to the durability of leather dwellings in conditions of constant humidity and frequent rain. The inner canopy served another important function. It prevented clear shadows from appearing on the walls of the teepee at night. This was directly relevant to safety, as potential enemies outside could not see the silhouettes of people and their movements. The double wall absorbed the light from the fire, making life inside private, hidden, and protected. Thus, the liner simultaneously solved the problems of warmth, dryness, ventilation, and camouflage. In the summer heat, this same canopy began to work in reverse, helping to cool the air inside the teepee. The Indians simply lifted the edges of the main skin, creating a powerful through-flow of cool air. The system, originally designed to protect against rain and cold, proved to be equally effective in hot conditions. Such versatility still amazes modern engineers and architects. If this inner layer did not exist, condensation from people's breath and the burning fire would inevitably turn into water droplets on the ceiling. On a rainy night, this would mean that cold dew would constantly fall on the sleepers, quickly cooling their bodies and clothes. The liner collected all this moisture and carefully carried it away to a safe space between the walls. The Indians understood the importance of humidity control long before the terms dew point and vapor barrier were coined. In the next chapter, you will learn how the Indians controlled the sky above their heads using just 2 movable poles. Are you ready to learn the truth about how you can adjust the roof without getting out of bed or going out in the rain? What do you think of this double wall system in ancient nomadic dwellings? Do you consider it ingenious? Share your thoughts in the comments. We are genuinely interested in your opinion. What I am about to show you is prohibited in many modern survival guides because of its complexity. At the top of each teepee were 2 movable flaps that resembled the ears of a huge beast. They were controlled by long external poles, allowing the size and direction of the smoke hole to be adjusted. During a heavy downpour, the person inside could instantly change their position. One flap overlapped another, creating a tight leather canopy over the hearth. It did not let a single drop of water inside, effectively diverting the rain to the sides. At the same time, the design allowed for a tiny gap on the leeward side for smoke to escape. This was critical for keeping the fire going and warming the whole family. Fire was the only way to dry clothes and warm the air on a cold, rainy night. Surprisingly, even with the valves closed, the teepee continued to breathe thanks to the inflow of air from below. The manual roof control system allowed it to adapt to any wind direction in seconds. It was a living and very flexible architecture, subject to human will. The poles for controlling the flaps were usually the longest and strongest in the tepee's construction. They had to withstand powerful gusts of wind and the weight of wet, heavy leather. An experienced owner could adjust the position of the ears, even in complete darkness, by touch. This required skill, which children learn from their parents from an early age. Proper adjustment of the vents created a low-pressure area inside the teepee that drew the smoke out. If the vents were set incorrectly, the smoke would begin to descend toward the sleeping people. This was especially dangerous in rainy weather due to the increased density of the moist atmospheric air. The Indians skillfully used the laws of aerodynamics for their daily comfort. In some tribes, the shape and angle of these vents were considered a sign of the status of the owner of the house. Beautifully adjusted teepee ears spoke of the skill and experience of the hunter living inside. It was not only a functional element, but also part of the aesthetics of nomadic life. Every detail at the top had its own deep practical and spiritual meaning. If the wind suddenly changed direction, the owner of the teepee simply rearranged the lower ends of the outer poles. The roof instantly turned in the right direction, blocking raindrops from entering the opening. This was much more effective than any stationary roof of a conventional wooden house. Mobility and flexibility were the main advantages of the inhabitants of the Great Plains. These valves also served to send light signals to other members of the tribe at dusk. The reflection of the fire from the inside of the skin created a noticeable beacon against the dark prairie. In the rain, when visibility was limited, this landmark helped hunters find their way home. Thus, the roof of the house also became a means of navigation in space. The smoke vent system was so reliable that it allowed food to be cooked even in the midst of a storm. Moisture did not get into the pot, and the smoke did not bother the eyes of the inhabitants of the cozy dwelling. This created a sense of stability in normal life despite the raging elements outside the walls. People could relax, knowing that their hearth was safely protected. Like this video if you are impressed by this simple but incredibly effective climate control system. What other ancient invention do you think is as well thought out and effective in harsh conditions? We always welcome your feedback and try to respond to the most interesting comments. Your support helps us create even better content. What if I showed you a time machine that would take us to the bedroom of a Lakota warrior? Protection from water above was only half the battle in combating the elements of the prairie. Much more dangerous was the moisture coming from the wet ground beneath the teepee itself. The Indians never slept directly on the ground, using special platforms instead. First, a layer of pine branches or very thick dry grass was laid on the ground. This created natural drainage and an air cushion to insulate from the cold ground. On top of this, thick mats woven from reeds or flexible willow rods were laid. They did not absorb moisture and allowed air to circulate freely under the body. The final layer was heavy bison hides, always laid with the wool facing up. This ensured maximum heat retention even in conditions of very high humidity. Small grooves were often dug around the edges of the sleeping area to drain water. They intercepted any accidental moisture and directed it to the center of the teepee. This multi-layered system ensured that a person's bed would remain warm and cozy until morning. Even if the floor of the teepee became wet, the sleeping area remained a dry island. The Indians knew that hypothermia begins precisely from contact with the cold ground. Therefore, a great deal of time and attention was devoted to preparing a place to sleep. Beds were usually located along the walls where the layer of the inner canopy provided better protection. In the center of the teepee, there was always free space around the warm and bright hearth. This allowed the heat to be evenly distributed throughout the entire area, warming every member of the family. This layout was the result of centuries of experience living in a harsh climate. The skins used for beds were specially treated to protect them from insects and rot. They were often fumigated with herbs, which repelled moisture and gave them a pleasant aroma. This made sleeping not only safe but also very comfortable from a hygiene point of view. Each element of the bed was carefully selected and prepared for the long winter. During sleep, Native Americans often covered themselves with another large bison hide on top. It worked like a heavy blanket that kept out drafts and retained heat. Bison fur has unique thermoregulatory properties, preventing a person from overheating or freezing. It was the ideal equipment for living in wild and unpredictable natural conditions. Finally, the entire structure was covered with a thick layer of turf and soil. The thickness of this earthen shell could reach half a meter or more. In summer, this layer kept the house cool, and in winter, it acted as a massive heat accumulator. It prevented internal heat from escaping and external frost from penetrating inside. Interestingly, children's cradles were hung from tepee poles at a certain distance from the floor. This completely eliminated the risk of the child getting wet in the event of sudden flooding. The wisdom of the parents was evident in every little thing, ensuring the survival of the next generation of the tribe. Children grew up dry and warm, regardless of the vagaries of the weather. Would you like to spend a night in such a bed to the sound of a real prairie rainstorm? In the next chapter, we will learn how the forest Indians built their homes. What part of the bed do you think was most important for maintaining health? We look forward to your answers in the comments below this video. In the dense forests of the Northeast, conditions were different, and the Iroquois built their famous longhouses. Instead of animal skins, they used tree bark to create a reliable and durable covering. The bark of elm or ash trees was stripped in huge sheets during the period of active sap flow in the spring. At this time, it was most flexible and malleable for the craftsmen to work with. These sheets were laid on the frame of the house like modern overlapping tiles. Each layer overlapped the edges of the other, so that water could flow down the slope unhindered. For additional tightness, the joints were sealed with a mixture of tree resin and fat. Such a roof was completely impervious to water, even during the most prolonged downpours. Inside the longhouse, tall two-tiered bunks were located along all the walls. This completely eliminated any contact between sleeping people and the damp or cold floor. The upper tier served as additional protection for the lower one, trapping any possible condensation. The space under the bunks was used to store dry firewood and winter supplies. Smoke from several central fires rose up to openings in the roof. It created a layer of warm, dry air just below the ceiling of the huge building. This prevented the bark and wooden rafters from rotting, extending the life of the entire house. The Iroquois were true masters of forest architecture and effective collective survival. Each longhouse could accommodate several dozen people from one family. This created a single thermal circuit that was easier to heat during the cold seasons. Moisture brought in by people from outside quickly evaporated thanks to the heat from the many hearths. Order and cleanliness in such a house were the key to the health of the entire clan. The entrances to the house were protected by heavy curtains made of skins or double doors made of bark. This created a vestibule that prevented cold rain from entering the living area directly. The Iroquois designed the ventilation system so that fresh air could enter without excess moisture. Life in such a house was very organized and subject to strict rules. Special bark gutters were sometimes installed on the roofs to collect rainwater. This allowed women to stay away from the river during heavy and dangerous storms. The collected water was clean and suitable for all the domestic needs of a large family. The practicality of the forest peoples was evident in their ability to use the forces of nature to their advantage. The wooden frame of the house was so strong that it could withstand the weight of wet bark and snow. The Indians used flexible cedar branches to tie all the elements of the structure together. These joints did not rot from moisture and only became stronger over time. The longhouse was a symbol of the stability and indestructibility of the union of the 5 great nations. Drainage ditches were often dug around the houses to carry away meltwater and rainwater. This kept the foundation dry and prevented soil erosion around the living area. The Iroquois understood the importance of landscape planning for the longevity of their settlements. Their villages were a model of engineering and deep knowledge of natural processes. Even during the strongest autumn storms, an atmosphere of calm reigned inside the longhouse. The sound of raindrops hitting the hard bark of the tree created a rhythmic backdrop for the elders' stories. People felt like they were part of the forest, safely protected by its gifts and their own skills. It was a life in complete harmony with the rhythms of the wild. This is what really happened behind the tightly closed doors of the teepee. When torrential rain, squally winds, and a veritable hurricane raged outside. For the Indians, the fire inside the dwelling was not just a source of heat and light, but a carefully controlled tool for survival and moisture control. They understood perfectly well that in rainy weather, too strong a fire would do more harm than good. So they always kept the flames even, calm, and steady. The hearth was invariably located in a small depression exactly in the center of the teepee, which was the result of centuries of observation and practice. Such wood was ideal for use in a furnace. It was not only an important find, but also a solution to many problems that arose at low temperatures. Working with dead wood was less labor-intensive and much more efficient than processing frozen trees. Large, carefully selected stones were tightly packed around the hearth, which accumulated heat perfectly. These stones turned into a kind of heat accumulator, continuing to give off heat even after the fire had died down. If water fell into the pit, it quickly heated up and evaporated without creating dampness and cold. The heat from the coals and hot stones turned any accidental moisture into steam, which naturally rose and escaped through the smoke hole in the roof. This created constant air circulation inside the teepee. To start a fire in wet weather, the Indians always kept a special, carefully guarded supply of dry birch bark. It was hidden in the most protected and highest places of the teepee, where neither rainwater nor condensation could reach it. The right balance between heat, smoke, and ventilation created the effect of a real drying cabinet inside. This allowed warriors to dry their moccasins, capes, and clothing right during their night's rest. The items were carefully hung on horizontal poles in the area of rising warm air, where they dried slowly but completely. By morning, all the equipment was dry, soft, and ready for another long journey. The Indians understood perfectly well that damp shoes and clothes were a direct path to disease and death. So comfort was not a luxury for them, but a condition for survival. Firestones were also used to heat water without the use of metal utensils, which were rare. The hot stone was carefully lowered into a leather bag or vessel with water, and it boiled in a matter of moments. This made it possible to prepare hot food, broths, and medicinal drinks without going out into the rain or squall. This was the wisdom of the nomads, to get the most out of every available resource without wasting unnecessary energy. Snow cover not only insulated the dwelling, but also provided additional thermal insulation properties. Wigwams were never placed directly on the surface of the snow. In order to create the warmest and most protected space possible, the site was first cleared down to the ground. This required effort but provided a solid foundation for further construction. The Indians knew how to determine the quality of firewood by its sound, weight, and smell, even in complete darkness. For a nighttime fire in the rain, they chose hardwoods that burned long, evenly, and with virtually no sparks. This was critically important for the safety of the teepee's leather covering, as a single spark could cause a fire. The art of fire management was considered a basic skill for every adult member of the tribe and was passed on to children from an early age. The smoke from the fire also served a protective function, repelling insects, which are especially active in wet weather. A thin layer of fragrant smoke created an invisible barrier inside the teepee, without interfering with breathing. Certain herbs with disinfectant and antiseptic properties were often added to the fire. In this way, the hearth became not only the heart of the home, but also the center of health for the entire family. In the next chapter, we will take a detailed look at how Native Americans made their waterproof clothing and what natural materials allowed them to stay dry even in the harshest conditions. What do you think is the best material for protection against moisture and cold? Write your guess in the comments. Your question may become the basis for our next big research project. Surviving a rainstorm required not only a dry home, but also the right personal equipment. Native Americans used skins that had undergone a long and careful smoking process. This method made the leather resistant to deformation, even after repeated exposure to water. Unlike regular suede, smoked leather did not stiffen and remain soft. To protect against heavy rain, they often wore whole bison hides with the fur on the outside. Water simply ran down the long fibers of the wool without penetrating the animal's skin. The fur acted like thousands of tiny gutters, directing the rain away from the body. This allowed people to stay warm even under icy streams of water. In wet weather, moccasins were thickly coated with bear or wild deer fat. The fat filled all the pores of the material and created a reliable water-repellent barrier on the surface. This allowed the feet to stay dry during long walks in wet and tall grass. Layers of dry moss or soft wool were often used inside the shoes. This multi-layered protection for the feet was critical for preventing disease and blisters. The Indians took great care of their shoes, as the mobility of the entire group depended on them. After each trip, the moccasins were thoroughly cleaned and re-impregnated with fresh fat over fire. This was a daily ritual that ensured the reliability of the equipment in all conditions. Shirts and leggings were often decorated with fringe, not only for beauty and style. Long leather strips helped water run off clothing faster without being absorbed. Every detail of the costume had a deep practical rationale, proven by thousands of years of life on the prairie. Native American clothing was the pinnacle of functional design at the time. In some northern regions, Native Americans sewed raincoats from the intestines of large marine animals. These garments were completely transparent and completely waterproof, resembling modern raincoats. They weighed very little and could be folded into a very small bundle for carrying. Such clothing was indispensable for hunters who spent a lot of time on the water. Leather caps or hoods sewn directly onto the capes were used to protect the head. They covered the neck to prevent water from running down the back of the neck, which was the most unpleasant thing in the rain. Hair was often greased with oil to prevent it from getting wet and taking heat away from the head. Preserving internal energy was the basis of the indigenous people's philosophy of survival. The seams on clothing were sewn with animal sinew, which expanded when wet and plugged the holes. This made the joints virtually airtight and very strong against tearing under stress. The sinew threads did not rot or wear out from constant contact with moisture and salt. Every detail of the clothing was thought out to the smallest detail. The color of the clothing was often chosen to match the color of the terrain during rain for camouflage. Wet leather became darker, helping the hunter literally blend in with the surrounding landscape and bushes. The ability to be invisible was a major advantage in hunting and warfare on the plains. Nature itself provided the Indians with the best tools for stealth and protection. Even in the strongest storm, a warrior felt confident in his leather clothing. He knew that his clothes would not let him down and would protect him from the piercing wind and moisture. This gave him a psychological advantage over any opponent who was less prepared for the vagaries of the weather. Their ability to adapt made the Indians the true masters of this wild and beautiful land. During long journeys, the Indians often had to spend the night under the open sky without a tepee. In such cases, they built temporary shelters from bark, branches, and other materials at hand. The main rule was to choose a place on a natural elevation or a slight slope. This ensured that rainwater would not accumulate under the sleeping warrior's body. The shelters were built so that their solid back wall faced the wind. This created a calm and relatively dry area inside the small improvised camp. Pine bark or thick spruce branches laid tightly together were used for the roof. Such a shelter could be built in just 30 minutes of active work. If bark was not available, skins stretched over a flexible willow frame were used. A fire was lit directly in front of the entrance, so that its heat would reflect inside the shelter. This allowed a comfortable temperature to be maintained even in very wet and windy weather. The Indians were masters at quickly erecting effective defensive and residential structures. Particular attention was paid to fire safety in temporary camps in dense forests. The hearth was surrounded by stones or damp earth to prevent sparks from setting the ground on fire. To keep warm at night, large logs were used, which smoldered slowly until morning. The ability to keep a fire going in any conditions was considered the highest sign of a warrior's skill. Sometimes large fallen trees or rock niches were used as temporary homes. The Indians knew how to see potential shelter in every element of the wild landscape around them. They simply supplemented the natural form with branches or skins to create a cozy nest. This required minimal effort and gave excellent results in the fight against the elements. During rain, warriors tried not to take off their clothes so that they would dry on their bodies. The heat of the human body was the best engine for evaporating excess moisture from the skin. The main thing was to keep moving or sit as close as possible to a source of heat. The Indians possessed incredible physical endurance and the ability to endure any everyday hardships. They used rawhide bags to protect their weapons and supplies from moisture. Bows and arrows were always stored in cases impregnated with fat to protect the glue and sinew. Damage to weapons on a campaign could mean death for the entire detachment from hunger or the enemy. Therefore, caring for equipment was even more important than personal comfort on a campaign. In temporary shelters, They slept in groups, huddling together to stay warm. Collective warmth allowed them to survive even when the fire was flooded by a sudden heavy downpour. Mutual assistance and close ties between members of the detachment were the basis of their survival culture. Every warrior knew that he could rely on his comrades in the most difficult moments. If the group encountered a prolonged storm, they built a more durable shelter. A wigwam made of flexible poles and covered with mats could serve as a reliable home for several weeks. The Indians were not afraid of work and always sought to improve their living conditions. Living in harmony with nature required constant activity and a sharp mind. The ability to quickly find a dry place was an innate talent of every forest dweller. They read the signs of the forest, determining where the ground would dry out fastest after a storm. This experience was passed down from older to younger generations through stories and joint expeditions. This is how the legendary ability of indigenous peoples to survive where others perished was forged. Long and incessant rains posed a threat to Native Americans, not only in the form of obvious water and cold, but also in the form of hidden, far more dangerous dampness, capable of silently destroying belongings, food, and people's health. To counter this threat, nomadic peoples developed a complex and sophisticated system for protecting their property from moisture. One of the key elements was special airtight containers made of thick tan leather. These bags, known as parfleche, were exceptionally dense and reliable. They were used to store dried meat, pemmican, valuable furs, and clothing. A properly made parfleche was virtually impervious to water and could not only survive a heavy downpour, but also float calmly down a river without getting wet inside. Fur blankets, ceremonial clothing, and especially valuable items were regularly brought closer to the fire for mandatory airing. The heat and smoke gradually drew moisture out of the thick pile while destroying bacteria, mold, and insects. The Indians had a keen sense of smell and could instantly tell if an item was starting to smell musty. The condition of personal belongings was an indicator of the family's well-being. In their culture, dryness was directly associated with longevity, health, and respect for the work of their ancestors. Even the poles themselves required constant attention, as rainwater could seep into the dwelling through them. Before installation, the poles were carefully cleaned of bark and irregularities, making the surface smooth and slippery for drops. Any crack or roughness could cause drops to form and constant dampness inside. Over time, well-prepared poles were impregnated with smoke from the hearth, darkened, became harder, and served for decades, passing from generation to generation. Inside the teepee, strict order was maintained even during the most difficult periods of nomadic life and prolonged bad weather. Wet items were never thrown on the ground, as this instantly created pockets of dampness and cold. Clothes, skins, and moccasins were hung on special crossbars under the dome, where the air was warmest and driest. An upward flow of air constantly circulated there, ensuring quick and even drying. To combat mold and mustiness, it was common practice to fumigate the dwelling with aromatic herbs such as sage, sweetgrass, and cedar branches. Their smoke had natural antiseptic properties and filled the teepee with a clean, recognizable scent. The Indians believed that purifying the air also purified a person's thoughts and spirit. Hygiene, physical cleanliness, and spiritual practices were inseparable and formed a single way of life. Special attention was paid to leather goods, which could become deformed from excessive moisture. They tried to store them either stretched out or tightly rolled up in protective covers. Preserving shape was considered a sign of skill and a caring attitude towards work. It was the women of the tribe who were the main keepers of knowledge about proper care of the home, clothing, and supplies. The comfort, warmth, and safety of the family directly depended on their skills. During periods of prolonged rain, the diet also changed. Preference was given to more caloric and hot foods, fatty soups, broths, and pemmican. Such food helped the body generate more internal heat and more effectively combat dampness and cold. Food was considered an essential part of the overall survival system, supporting the body's strength from within. The strategy was to sit out the winter rather than fight it. Instead of expending energy on constant movement, people concentrated on staying warm, maintaining social ties, and preparing for the new season. This wise strategy of passive resistance to the cold was the key to their success. If the teepee got too wet or the ground beneath it turned into a swamp, The dwelling was simply moved to a new, drier location. Nomads were not tied to one spot and could change camp in a matter of hours. The search for dry land was a constant process in the life of the Great Plains tribes. Mobility served as their main shield against prolonged rains, floods, and climatic disasters. The Indians understood perfectly well that mold could destroy food supplies for the entire winter. Therefore, they built storage facilities on high platforms or in special protected pits with well-designed ventilation. The air in such places circulated constantly, preventing moisture from stagnating. The preservation of food resources was the basis for the stability, well-being, and survival of the entire tribe. Northern people, such as the Cree and Athabascans, lived in conditions of constant moisture and cold. Their dwellings had very steep slopes so that wet snow and rain would not linger on the roof. They used a thick layer of reindeer moss as insulation and waterproofing for the floor. This material had unique antiseptic and absorbent properties given by nature. The moss absorbed any accidental moisture, always remaining dry to the touch on top. At the same time, it served as an excellent heat insulator, preventing the cold from the ground from penetrating the house. Sleeping bags made from reindeer skins were sewn with a double layer for maximum protection. The inner layer of fur kept the body warm, while the outer layer protected against accidental water droplets. The air gap between the two layers of skins created an unbeatable barrier against the cold. The hearths in such houses were lined with massive stones that acted as heat accumulators. They dried the air inside the dwelling throughout the long polar night. The wisdom of the northern peoples allowed them to feel at home in the harshest forests. The Cree used birch bark to cover their summer dwellings because it does not rot. This material is so waterproof that it was used to make canoes for traveling on rivers. Birch bark was easy to repair and replace, providing a reliable roof over one's head in any downpour. The forest provided the northern Indians with everything they needed to build the perfect shelter. The winter homes of the Athabascans were often partially dug into the ground to better retain heat. They were covered with a layer of turf, which over time turned into a monolithic living roof. This design was very warm and completely protected from heavy rains and blizzards. The interior was always kept dry thanks to the constant burning of a central hearth. The clothing of northerners was a masterpiece of engineering, designed to protect against moisture and icy winds. Parkas made of animal skins were sewn with ventilation in mind, so that sweat would not turn to ice inside the clothing. The ability to balance warmth and humidity was a vital skill in the North. Every movement and every detail of daily life was subject to the harsh laws of the Arctic. To protect themselves from splashes on the water, hunters used aprons made of seal or sealskin. These materials are naturally completely waterproof and highly durable. Northern tribes skillfully combined the gifts of the forest and the sea to create the perfect equipment. Their ingenuity knew no bounds when it came to ensuring personal comfort. During periods of high humidity, Northerners used dry pine needles as footbeds in their shoes. The needles absorbed moisture and released pleasant essential oils that protected the skin of the feet. This simple natural deodorant and dehumidifier helped maintain health during long journeys. The nature of the North was harsh, but it also provided all the medicines needed for survival. The subarctic Indians believed that the spirits of the forest helped those who respected its rules. Keeping their homes dry and clean was part of this respectful attitude toward the world. Order in the home reflected order in the minds and souls of each member of the community. Harmony with the surrounding world was the key to their longevity and prosperity in the forests. The legacy of these peoples is still being studied by modern survival experts. Many of their methods prove to be more effective than the most expensive modern synthetic materials. True wisdom lies in the ability to see and use the hidden properties of what surrounds us. The Northern Indians were and remain great teachers of life in extreme conditions. We have seen that the secret of the Indians' dry nights lay in a deep understanding of the laws of physics. From the aerodynamics of the teepee to the chemical properties of smoked leather, everything worked toward a single goal. This knowledge, honed over centuries, allowed these peoples to thrive where others would have given up. Their experience teaches us to respect nature and use its gifts wisely and with great gratitude. What do you think about these methods of survival in the wild and heavy rains? Which of the discoveries in this video impressed you the most with its simple genius? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on the channel in the comments. We will definitely review your suggestions and try to cover the most interesting aspects of the story. Be sure to subscribe to our channel to continue discovering the world of ancient skills and wisdom.